Time to challenge those around you to a game of target toss. Hello, my name's Matt, and today you're going to be designing your own game. We're going to be talking about physically building the game itself, and then we're going to be talking about designing the rules, making sure that they are fair, making sure they are balanced, and overall making sure that they are fun to play. So specifically, we're going to be making a target toss game. That's the style of game where you take a beanbag or a similar object and you throw it at a target, and there's going to be different point values and there's going to be different spots on the target that have different special rules. We'll get into the details on the special rules a little bit later in this video. But there's a few supplies you're going to need. The bare minimum, you're going to need some paper. Doesn't matter what kind of paper, doesn't matter if it's lined or not, and you're going to need something to write with. A pencil works. If you have tape or something such as a rock to use as a paperweight, that's great, but not necessarily required. This paper is mostly going to be for the prototype version of your game. That's the version that you're going to be testing and making sure it works, so that way you can test out any problems, and then when you make the final version of your game, you can make it out of something a little bit more durable than paper, such as cardboard. Cardboard can be found pretty easily. Anytime you get pizza, it comes with one of these. Every time you get cereal, it comes with one of these, and those will work perfectly fine, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We need to design our game before we make the final version of it. So first off, in a target toss game, you got to decide, what are you tossing at the target? This can be a beanbag, this can be a small stuffed animal or a plushie, this could be a hacky sack, this could be a coin, and there's kind of cool rules you can add with the heads and tails that we'll talk about in a little bit. Or you can make something. There's another video called Sock to Beanbag, which teaches you how to make these beanbags out of socks. And that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using the beanbags, and I'm also going to be using this quarter as the thing that I toss at the target. But you can use whatever you want. Make sure that you test out the object and kind of get to know, how does it bounce, how does it roll, how is it going to react when you toss it at the piece of paper or cardboard or whatever your target is going to be made out of. This is going to determine how far apart the spaces are on your board, how big of a board you might decide to make, and things like that. So we're going to take a look at our paper here, and we're going to design the spacing for our target board. First off, I'm going to throw my beanbag on here a couple times to kind of see a sense of how big it is in comparison to the piece of paper, and see if it rolls or bounces. As you can see, it doesn't really do much of either. But also, I want my spaces to be big enough that most of the time the beanbag is only going to land on one, maybe two spaces at the same time. So I'm going to make my spaces at least that big. I'm going to make this somewhat simple, but I don't want to make it look exactly like a dartboard. And again, you can make yours look however you want. You can also make multiple different boards, so it's kind of like different levels of the game, so to speak. So it's not like it has to be just one board all the time. But I, for some reason, am thinking about this kind of pattern. So that's what I'm going to do for mine. Actually, and I'm going to subdivide it just a little bit more, give it a little bit more spaces. All right, and then actually, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to go like this. And there's a reason I'm subdividing these up, and I'll explain that in just a little while. So that's what my board's going to look like, but yours is going to look like whatever you want. So next we're going to talk about number scale, and what I mean is, what range of numbers are the points going to be in this game? Is it going to be a range of like 1 point to 10 points, and 10 points is a really good toss? Or is it going to be like a range from 1 to 200? Now keep in mind the group of people you're going to be playing this with. The younger the people, the smaller numbers you should probably use. And if you're playing with teens or adults, you can use whatever number scale you want. We're going to go with a scale from, let's say, 1 to 10. 10 is going to be the top number of points you can get on this. So I'm actually going to make this middle one worth 10 points right here. So if you land the beanbag or the quarter or the whatever you're using on the 10 spot, you get 10 points. Now this 10 spot is very special. So what that means is the spots right next to it need to be not as good. They need to be things like a 1 and a 2. So that way you're aiming for that 10, but you also might land on the 1 or the 2 if you're not too careful. I'm going to then fill out these other numbers. I'm going to put kind of a medium number, say 5 over here and 7 over here. So that way it's like a high number, a really small number, and kind of an okay number in the middle. So that way there's a reason for you to aim at the edge, but you also might land completely off the board. There's a reason for you to aim in the middle, but you also accidentally might get a really low score. You don't want all your high numbers to be on one side of the board and all your low numbers to be on the other side of the board, because then people will always be aiming for the part with the most score. And then what would be even the point of having the other side of the board? Being that these spaces are a little bit bigger, I've decided they're going to be a smaller amount of points than, say, the 10 or maybe even the 7. I'm not going to use 2 right here because I don't want to have 2 of the same numbers right next to each other. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just something that kind of bothers me a little bit. So I'm going to put, say, a 4. I was going to put a 3, but for some reason it just seemed too close. I'm not sure why. And then let's put another 2 over here because that's far enough away. You know what? Why not? Let's make it somewhat symmetrical. So another 2 and another 4 over here. Now you notice I've left these 2 blank on purpose, and there's a reason for that. Often when I'm making target toss games, I will put in special spots. Things to double your score, things to divide your score by 2, things to make you trade your score with the score of another person. So we're going to do something like that. So since this is next to some bad things right here and next to some good things right here, you know what? I've decided this 2 is not going to be a 2. And this is part of the game design process. And this is why we're making a prototype, because you change your mind because you want to make your game balanced. So I'm actually going to make it, you know what? I'm going to make it a 5 over here, so it kind of makes you want to toss in this area, but there's going to be something bad right here. So what it's going to be, I'm going to do something really mean right here. So I went ahead and already wrote it, but I'm going to put trade scores with the player with the lowest score. So if you land the beanbag on that spot, or mostly on that spot, and let's say you have 15 points and I have 2 points, well, guess what? Now you have 2 points and I have your 15 points. So then I'm going to do something really nice, and I'm going to do the opposite over here. So trade scores with the player with the highest score. So if you have 2 points and I have 15 and you landed right here, well, guess what? You have my 15 and I'm stuck with the 2 points you had now. But I've also decided I want to make my board kind of balanced all the way across. So since we have something really bad right here and we have something really good right here, I'm going to put something bad here and something good right here. So I'm going to put a ×2 right here. So if you land on this spot, your score is doubled, times by 2. And I'm going to put a divided by 2 right here. So if you land on this spot, your score is automatically divided by 2 or cut in half. So we have good next to bad, bad next to good. We have a low score next to a high score, next to a low score, next to a kind of a high score. You see, it's kind of balanced, and we don't have all the good things and all the bad things separated. We have them mixed up. And I just want to remind everybody that it's okay to mess up and it's okay to change your mind. This is actually the 3rd target toss board I made today in the process of making this video. I technically started with this one and decided that it wouldn't really work that well for a game. And then I made this one and I decided I didn't really like it either. So then I went with this one. So it's okay to mess up. It's okay to change your mind. And it's okay to tinker with different ideas. All good products in the end went through a bunch of different versions before they finally landed on the version that you see. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how do the rules work in your game. How many turns or rounds does the game go for? How many tosses do you get each time it's your turn? How far away from the target do you have to stand when you toss it? What do you do when 2 players have the same score, when there's a tie? Also, what do you do when it lands on a line between 1, 2, or even 3 spaces at the same time? There's a lot of different ways to do this. You get to decide how your game's going to go, but I'm going to show you how my version works. In my version of Target Toss, each player gets 4 turns. That means the game usually goes for 4 rounds, unless of course there's a tiebreaker, which I'll talk about in a little while. I always write down the names of all the people playing so I can keep track of their scores over here, and I can keep track of how many turns they've taken over here. As I said, it usually goes for 4 rounds, but let's say somebody has to skip a turn and then do their turn later. If I keep a tally of how many turns each player has done, I can make sure that everybody's gotten the same number of turns by the end of the game, no matter what happened. I always have some kind of line or object on the floor to designate where you're supposed to stand behind. You're not supposed to stand in front of that. So when it's your turn, you stand up to that object and then toss the beanbag or whatever object you're using. So she landed on the board and she got a 4. There's no question about that. Is definitely closer. So I'm going to write down a 4. The next player steps up and takes their turn. Oh. So notice that I missed the board, and that is okay. When it is your turn, you get 2 tries to land on the board. So I got to land it this time, and if I land off of the board again, I end with 0 points on this round. So I'm going to try really hard to land on the board. All right, so I landed on one of the special spots we talked about. I landed on the trade scores with the player with the lowest score. So normally what would happen is we would trade scores, but since I had 0 points, I'm going to trade scores with myself and end up with 0. And next up is Cleo's turn. Boom! So Cleo got 5 points right there, so I'm going to write 5 on the scoreboard. As the game progresses, you'll just keep track of how many turns everybody gets over here, keeping track of their scores, and keeping in mind that scores are going to change all over the place as you are trading scores and such. As you can see, though, that Cleo the dog clearly won this game.
Cleo, you won! You won, you won, you won, you won, you won, you won, you won! Cleo, are you so happy? You just won the bestest game ever! You won!
So once you've tested your game and decided if any changes need to be made or decided if your game is good as it is, you can choose to put it on a piece of cardboard or something a little bit more durable. I'm going to use this cardboard pizza pan thing right here. I think I'm going to change this to a little bit more of a circle, so I give it a little bit more of a dartboard look to it though. Earlier I mentioned using a quarter or a coin in this. Some special rules you can make is that the heads and the tails are 2 different sides, so they can mean different things. Maybe when you land with head side up, it's a +5 bonus, so 10 plus 5 would be 15. Or maybe heads doubles your score, whereas tails is just regular, so it would be 10 and it'd be 20. Or it would be 2 and then it would be 4 points. Things like that. Maybe you're going to use it a little bit different, or maybe you won't use a coin at all. There's so many different versions of this game you can make. So, this is what mine looks like, but yours is going to look different. It's going to be your own game design. Everybody's game is going to be a little bit different, and that's what's really cool about it. And you don't have to just make one board. You can make a bunch of different boards, like different levels, one for each round of the game if you want. I'm really excited about hearing about your game. I'm excited about how you made your board, and I'm excited to hear about how did you make the rules of your game. Did you use the same rules that I did, or did you change it a little bit? So until next time, I hope you're having fun and I hope you're staying inspired.